Welcome to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring the random prompts of Daniel Rosehill as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters. Join us for deep dives into AI, technology, and whatever other random thing Daniel finds fascinating today. Subscribe on Spotify or your favorite podcatcher. Now, today's episode.
My Weird Prompts is an AI-generated podcast produced by Daniel Rosehill, a verified human with documentation to prove it. While every effort is made to ensure our AI hosts draw from credible sources and run on cutting-edge models, they do occasionally make things up with alarming confidence. As with everything in life, and especially this podcast, treat all claims as spurious until confirmed to be not. Daniel, Herman and Corn accept no responsibility for any decisions made based on the confident ramblings of our artificial presenters. Now, today's episode.
Hey there, Herman and Corn. So a question for you regarding hosting things at home, self-hosting in the purest sense of the word, not even on a VPS on your own network. And nowadays with things like Tailscale and Cloudflare, it's definitely become more feasible, I think, to securely host things at home without kind of worrying too much about stuff like port exposure and having to do things like port forwarding that until fairly recent were kind of standard, and which I never did because it made me far too nervous to have a port exposed on my home network that the internet could access. What I'd like to ask you about is as follows. I have like maybe a few of the folks who might listen to this podcast, a difference between the resources I have at home. I have a very good desktop workstation, or it's my best hardware, let's say. It's running AMD, 64 gigabytes of RAM, decent enough GPU, and therefore it's the most useful thing that I have really for doing stuff like generative AI projects and anything that requires some kind of serious, well, not really that serious, but some kind of processing power. I have a home server as well that is a recommissioned former computer of mine. And by comparison, it's a much, much older piece of hardware. It's running an i3, and it's just kind of sitting there doing some stuff like running Homebox and Home Assistant. And it will probably eventually stop working, or I'll be able to, afford to actually upgrade it to something better, which would probably be the best option. But at the moment, there are certain workloads that would actually make more sense for me if I was going to an AI workflow. It would be more logical to do it on my computer. Now, the reason I haven't done that is because I turn off my computer when I'm not using it. But I don't necessarily have to do that. I remember calculating before how much electricity the computer uses when it's not in a workstation configuration, when the screens are off, etc. Because not only, besides the electricity thing, I also, from an environmental perspective, don't want to just waste power needlessly and gratuitously. So I did the calculation for that aspect as well, and it was actually very, very low. In fact, and financially, the yearly power consumption of leaving it on in a kind of very low energy process just really wasn't that significant at all. So my question is as follows, and this is again just kind of a general infrastructural home hosting, home labbing question. If I wanted to use a desktop computer as a mixed server/desktop, so when I'm, I want to turn on the screens when I want to use it, but then instead of turning it off or even putting it into suspend, when I leave the workstation, I just turn off the screens and it's still running, and it's there, therefore always to run workload. So it's kind of like a server that you can use as a GUI. Now my questions are, I can't think of any reason why this wouldn't work in theory, except that certain times there's, of course, the classic tech support response that you try turning it on and off. Certain things I've noticed in computing do require periodic refreshes, and as much as it's kind of true that a server is just a computer not on your network, there are some differences in terms of how the server, I assume the fact that there are server variants of everything means that there's some kind of significant differences in how at a low level they're built to be on all the time, whereas a desktop, unless you never sleep, doesn't have that same expectation. So I'm wondering if one were to attempt to do something like this, to run a kind of mixed server desktop on one computer, because you might neither have money or space or resources to host a bunch of big computers in your home environment, if there's any kind of recognized or established way to do that. And I'm asking really as well at the kind of power management aspect of it, in the sense that would I need to custom write scripts for turning off my screens on and off, verifying that it's kind of running, verify, creating some method for when it does really need to actually physically do a restart, timing that it happens at a certain time and ensuring that it actually does happen when it's needed. Are there any ways that you're aware of to run a single unified desktop server in the home environment, or for that matter, in the small business environment?
Welcome back to My Weird Prompts, the podcast where we dive deep into the most intriguing questions sent our way. I'm your host, Corn, and as a natural-born slow thinker, I'm always ready for a thoughtful exploration. And with me, as always, is the sharp-witted and incredibly knowledgeable Herman.
And I'm Herman Poppleberry, here to bring some grounded expertise to Corn's sometimes Asterix flights of fancy Asterix. Today we're tackling a prompt from our very own producer, Daniel Rosehill, and it's a cracker for anyone who's ever dreamed of a more efficient home tech setup.
Oh, it truly is. This prompt explores a fascinating challenge running a mixed server desktop on a single computer, especially in a home or small business environment where resources are tight. The core question is about power management and whether there's an established way to handle things like screen turning off, verifying server processes, timed reboots, and ensuring everything happens when it needs to.
Exactly. And at first blush, you might think, why not just run a dedicated server? But that ignores the very real constraints of cost, space, and power consumption that many individuals and small businesses face. The idea of consolidating makes a lot of sense from that perspective.
I mean, I get it. I've got my desktop, my old media server under the TV, and then a separate little machine for my home automation stuff. It's a tangle of cables, and honestly, I probably only use a fraction of their combined power. The thought of collapsing all that into one machine, it's quite appealing.
It is, but it also introduces a host of complexities. You're trying to marry two fundamentally different operational paradigms. Desktops are designed for interactive use, often with graphical interfaces and user-driven shutdowns. Servers are built for headless continuous operation, often managed remotely, and optimized for uptime. Blending those without a clear strategy is a recipe for headaches.
But isn't that where the weird prompt comes in? Finding an elegant solution for a seemingly messy problem? My initial thought is, well, you just install the server stuff on your desktop, right? Like, I've got Windows, I can just install a web server on it, done.
Asterisk size, asterisk classic Corn, simplifying before we've even defined the problem. While technically you asterisk install server applications on a desktop OS, that's not what the prompt is really asking. It's about unified asterisk management, asterisk of those disparate roles, especially concerning power states and reliability. You're not just running server software, you're trying to make a desktop asterisk act asterisk like a server when you're not using it as a desktop.
Okay, you're right. It's not just about installing the software, it's about the how to manage it part. Like, if I'm watching a movie and my server decides it's time for a scheduled backup that grinds the system to a halt, that's not ideal. Or if I'm away and it needs to reboot, but then it gets stuck waiting for me to log in. That's the real challenge, isn't it?
Precisely, and that's where virtualization comes in as the most recognized and established approach. Instead of trying to blend operating systems and their power management behaviors directly, you run your server components within virtual machines VMs on your desktop's operating system, the host OS, or more efficiently, on a Type 1 hypervisor.
Virtualization? You mean like running Windows inside a Mac or Linux inside Windows? I've dabbled with that for testing software, but how does that solve the power management issue? Doesn't the host OS still need to be running all the time?
Excellent question, and that's where the architectural choices become critical. Let's delineate. The two main approaches for virtualization are Type 1 and Type 2 hypervisors. A Type 2 hypervisor like VirtualBox or VMware Workstation runs asterisk on top of asterisk your existing desktop operating system. You install Windows, then you install VirtualBox, then you create your server VM. This means your desktop OS is always running, consuming resources, and potentially interfering with your server workloads. The server VM's uptime is tied directly to the host OS's uptime.
So if my Windows desktop decides to force an update and reboot, my virtual server goes down with it. That's not very server-like.
Exactly. And that's why for a true unified desktop server, where the server components need higher reliability and independent operation, a Type 1 hypervisor is generally preferred. This is where things like Proxmox VE, ESXi, or even Hyper-V, if you're using Windows Server or Pro editions where it's a native component, come into play.
Wait, so with a Type 1 hypervisor, I wouldn't have a desktop OS in the traditional sense? I'd boot into Proxmox and then run my desktop asterisk and asterisk my server as virtual machines?
You've got it. That's the most robust solution for this kind of converged system. You install the Type 1 hypervisor directly onto the bare metal of your computer. Then you create separate virtual machines for your desktop environment, for example, Windows 10, Linux Mint, and your server components. For example, one, a Linux VM running your media server, another VM for home automation.
So I'd have a Windows VM I interact with for my daily desktop tasks, and then a headless Linux VM constantly running my server applications in the background, and the hypervisor manages everything including resource allocation.
Precisely. The hypervisor itself is a very lean operating system, primarily focused on managing and scheduling resources for the VMs. It handles the CPU, RAM, storage, and networking. This gives you several advantages regarding your power management question.
Let's take a quick break from our sponsors.
Is your home life feeling a bit uninspired? Are you tired of predictable furniture and sensible decor? Then you need Quantum Kitsch. Quantum Kitsch isn't just furniture, it's an experience. We use patented reality-bending resin to create household objects that subtly shift in appearance and function. One day, your coffee table might be a tasteful mid-century modern piece. The next, it's a shimmering, vaguely avian sculpture that hums softly. Your sofa could be a plush velvet haven, or a collection of self-rearranging geometric solids. You never know what you're going to get. Warning, may induce existential contemplation and mild vertigo. Quantum Kitsch, embrace the delightful domestic unknown. Buy now.
Alright, thanks Larry. Anyway, back to Type 1 hypervisors and their benefits. The key here is that the server VMs can be configured to run continuously, independent of your desktop VM state. If you shut down your desktop VM, or even if it crashes, your server VMs can continue running uninterrupted.
That's a huge step towards reliability. So if I'm not using the desktop part, I can just shut down the desktop VM and the server VMs keep chugging along, saving some resources, I guess?
Exactly, though the resource savings from shutting down a VM are primarily RAM and CPU cycles not being actively used by that VM. The underlying hypervisor and the other running VMs still consume power, but you gain immense flexibility. For your power management questions, first, turning off screens, your physical monitor would be connected to the graphics card, which you'd typically pass through to your desktop VM. When your desktop VM goes into a sleep state or shuts down, the display output from that VM would cease and your monitor would naturally go into standby. The hypervisor typically runs headless, so it doesn't need a display.
Okay, that makes sense for the screen. What about verifying that it's running ? Like, how do I know my server VM hasn't crashed if I'm not logged into my desktop VM?
That's where the hypervisor's management interface comes in. Proxmox, for example, has a web-based UI you can access from any device on your network. From there, you can see the status of all your VMs, their resource usage, stop them, and even access a console if needed. You could also set up monitoring within your server VMs that send alerts if services go down.
That sounds pretty robust. And what about Asterisk creating some method for when it does need to physically do a restart, timing that it happens at a certain time, and ensuring that it actually does happen when it's needed. Asterisk, this was a big part of the prompt.
For the physical machine restart, you'd typically schedule that at the hypervisor level. Most Type 1 hypervisors have scheduling capabilities. You can set the host machine to reboot nightly, weekly, or monthly, whatever suits your needs. The critical part is configuring your VMs to automatically start up after the host reboot. This is a standard feature in virtually all hypervisors. You'd set your server VMs to auto start and potentially your desktop VM as well, though you might prefer to start that manually when you need it.
So let's say I set the physical machine to reboot every Sunday at 3 a.m. The hypervisor reboots, then it automatically fires up my media server, my home automation hub, and then maybe my desktop VM if I want it to be ready for me. That sounds a lot less custom script heavy than I initially thought.
It is. The hypervisor abstracts away much of that complexity. You're not writing custom scripts for power management of individual server applications. You're managing the lifecycle of entire virtual machines. This is a well-trodden path in the data center world, scaled down for home use.
All right, we've got a caller on the line. I think it's Jim from Ohio. Hey Jim, what's on your mind?
Yeah, this is Jim from Ohio. I've been listening to you two going on and on about these hypervisors and VMs. You're making it sound like you need a degree in computer science just to turn on your computer. My neighbor Phil, he just uses his old laptop for his server. It's just got a bunch of hard drives plugged into it, and he streams movies. Works fine for him. And frankly, this whole virtual machine thing feels like a lot of unnecessary complexity. What's wrong with just plugging in a few hard drives and calling it a day? Also, my dog Buster just chewed up my favorite remote control, so I'm already annoyed.
Well, Jim, I appreciate the practical perspective. For simply streaming movies from a local hard drive, sure, an old laptop can suffice, but the prompt specifically asks about running a * mixed server desktop * with robust power management and reliability for various server roles. Phil's setup probably doesn't have a web server, a home automation controller, and a desktop environment all needing independent uptime and managed power states on a single machine.
Yeah, and Jim, what happens if Phil's laptop crashes? Or if he wants to play a demanding video game on it while his family is trying to stream from it? That's where the single machine with multiple roles starts to buckle. The whole point of virtualization here is to * isolate * those roles and give them dedicated, albeit virtual, resources and lifecycle management.
Isolation, schmisolation. My old desktop runs perfectly fine. It's got Windows on it. If I want to run something in the background, I just minimize it. You guys are overthinking it. And these hypervisors sounds like something out of a science fiction movie. What happened to just having a computer that does what you tell it to? Also, it's supposed to rain all weekend here in Ohio, and I had plans to paint the shed. Now what?
Jim, with all due respect, while minimizing an application works for some tasks, it doesn't provide the same level of resource isolation, security, or robust power management as a VM. If the desktop OS crashes, everything running on it, minimized or not, goes down. With a hypervisor, if your desktop VM crashes, your server VMs continue unaffected. It's about resilience and dedicated performance. It's not about making it complex for complexity's sake, but for stability and manageability in a converged environment.
Exactly. Think of it like a really smart apartment building. You live in your apartment, your desktop VM, and you have your own space and schedule. But the building manager, the hypervisor, is running the heating system, the electricity for common areas, and ensuring the elevators work your server VMs completely independently, even if your apartment has issues.
Apartment building. Sounds like more bills to me. Anyway, I still think it's overkill. You guys keep talking about reliability and resilience. My old Dell from 2008 is reliable enough for me. Thanks for nothing. Click *.
Thanks for calling in, Jim. Always insightful. Herman, Jim brings up a valid point about complexity for some users. For someone who just wants to run Plex, maybe a dedicated Raspberry Pi is simpler. But for the prompt-specific challenge of a * unified desktop server * on * one machine * with specific power management needs, Type 1 hypervisors really are the most established path.
They are. And let's not forget resource allocation. With a hypervisor, you can dedicate a certain number of CPU cores and RAM to your server VMs, ensuring they always have the resources they need, even if your desktop VM is under heavy load. You can also pass through specific hardware, like a dedicated GPU to your desktop VM for gaming or video editing, while your server VMs use integrated graphics or run headless.
So, if I have a powerful graphics card, I could literally be gaming in my desktop VM and my media server VM is still happily transcoding a movie for someone? That's pretty neat.
Absolutely. That's a common use case for these setups, often referred to as gaming VMs alongside server VMs. It demands a bit more technical know-how for the initial setup, especially GPU pass-through, but it's entirely feasible and well documented in communities like our home lab.
Moving on to the custom scripting part of the prompt. While a Type 1 hypervisor handles a lot, are there still situations where you might need custom scripts?
Yes, but the scope of those scripts would be much narrower and more focused on the asterisk applications asterisk within your VMs, rather than the underlying power management of the host or VMs themselves. For instance, you might write a script asterisk inside asterisk your server VM to 1, asterisk asterisk verify that a specific service is running, asterisk asterisk if your web server crashes, a script could detect that and attempt to restart it or send you an alert. This is standard server monitoring, not host power management. 2, asterisk asterisk handle graceful shutdowns, asterisk asterisk while the hypervisor can hard stop a VM, it's always better to send a graceful shutdown command to the guest OS, allowing applications to save data. You can script this at the hypervisor level, telling it to issue a shutdown guest OS command rather than a power off, asterisk, asterisk, automate application specific tasks, asterisk, asterisk, backups, log rotation, data synchronization. These would typically be cron jobs or scheduled tasks, asterisk within asterisk, your server VMs, not scripts managing the physical machine's power state.
So the custom scripting shifts from managing the hardware to managing the software asterisk within asterisk the virtual machines. That makes a lot more sense. It sounds like the overall answer to the prompt is that yes, there are established ways, and a Type 1 hypervisor is definitely the most robust method for a unified desktop server.
Agreed. For a home user or small business without the budget or space for multiple physical servers, this converged approach offers a powerful blend of flexibility, resource efficiency, and server-like reliability. It does require an initial investment in learning, but the payoff in terms of consolidation and control is significant.
And what about alternatives, just for completeness? If someone really doesn't want to go the hypervisor route, what are their options, even if they're less ideal?
Well, the old laptop approach Jim mentioned, but with more thought, you could run a desktop OS like Windows or Ubuntu desktop and install all your server applications directly on it. For power management, 1, asterisk, asterisk, screen off, asterisk, asterisk, standard OS power settings will handle this. 2, asterisk, asterisk, verify running asterisk, asterisk, you'd use native OS tools or third-party monitoring software to check applications. 3, asterisk, asterisk, scheduled reboots, asterisk, asterisk, the OS's built-in scheduler, task scheduler in Windows, cron and Linux could manage this. However, you lose the isolation. A desktop application crashing could affect your server apps, and updates requiring reboots would bring everything down. It's less reliable for critical server functions.
Okay, so essentially you're just piling everything onto one OS and hoping for the best, which for some light use cases might be fine, but for anything serious it's not ideal.
Exactly. And then there are containerization technologies like Docker. You can run Docker containers on a desktop OS, which offers asterisk some asterisk isolation for applications, but the containers still share the host OS kernel and are subject to the host OS's uptime and power management. It's a step up from just installing everything directly, but not as robust as full virtualization with a Type 1 hypervisor.
So for our listeners' prompt, if they're serious about the server part of desktop server and want that independent operation and reliable power management, the Type 1 hypervisor like Proxmox or ESXi is the way to go. It's the established method that tackles all the issues they brought up about screen management, verification, and scheduled reboots without needing extensive custom scripting for the underlying system.
Absolutely. It provides the framework. The custom scripting then becomes about optimizing the services asterisk within asterisk your server VMs, not wrestling with the host's power states. It's a powerful and increasingly popular solution for home labs and small business environments looking to maximize a single hardware investment.
That's a fantastic breakdown, Herman. It sounds like we've given our listener a really solid path forward. This topic really highlights how innovative people get when resources are scarce.
Indeed, resourcefulness often drives the most elegant technical solutions.
Alright, that brings us to the end of another fascinating episode of My Weird Prompts. A huge thank you to our producer Daniel Rosehill for sending in such a thought-provoking question. We love hearing these challenges.
And thank you for joining us. If you're looking to consolidate your home tech, hopefully this discussion gave you some concrete steps to consider.
You can find My Weird Prompts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your audio fix. Until next time, keep those weird prompts coming.
And keep those servers running, virtually speaking.
Thanks for listening to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring Daniel Rosehill's AI prompts, as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters including me, Cornelius the Sloth. Subscribe on Spotify or visit myweirdprompts.com.